Hello, I'm Brockett Horn, faculty at MICA and professor of History of Graphic Design. We're excited to host this year's William O. Steinmetz Designers in Residence to our Design History course, and to welcome members of our community and the public to join along too. A note to my students, today's program is a webinar, so we can't see you, but we can all communicate the same as ever in the chat. I hope to see you there with questions for our speakers. And now I'm going to pass it over to Ellen Lupton to start the program.
Hi there. I'm Ellen Lupton. I'm the founding director of the Graphic Design MFA program at MICA. I'm also the Betty Cook and William O. Steinmetz Design Chair, an endowed position created by Betty Cook, our beloved alum and the most extraordinary designer I know. Betty is here today and is going to say a few words to us shortly. I want to thank the incredible team at MICA who helped put this event together, our advancement team, our special events team, strategic communications, and all our amazing colleagues in graphic design. Thank you. We have live closed captioning today, which you can access with the CC button on the bottom of your screen. Before we introduce our amazing speakers, let's take a few moments to remember our special friend, Bill Steinmetz, class of 50. When Bill passed away in 2016, he left behind a community that loved him very, very much. Bill was a student, a professor, and a board member here at MICA. When he was a student here in the 1940s, he met an intense young sculptor and jewelry maker named Betty Cook. Bill and Betty were married for 61 years. They worked as designers here in Baltimore for the most progressive clients in the city. Their shop, the Store Limited, remains today Baltimore's most vital place to see and touch contemporary design, including Betty's spectacular jewelry. Bill was a gifted designer and a painter with an angel's heart. In 2009, Betty established the William O. Steinmetz 50 Designer in Residence program. This program allows us to invite influential artists and designers to our campus, including Teddy Cruz, Eddie Opara, Karen Fong, Lisa Strauswald, and Tobias Farrar-Jones, to name a few. The Steinmetz Residency, which is MICA's most important annual design event, is further supported by David and Joanne Hayden. Thank you, David and Joanne, for everything you do for MICA. Every object created by Betty Cook is like a line of poetry. It is rhythmic, eloquent, concise, and always unpredictable. I'm really excited that Betty is here today, and she's going to say a few words of love and welcome to all of you. Thanks, Betty, for joining us.
Okay. Well, I am so honored to be here. I'm so honored for all the 13 years that Ellen has produced or taken care of this program. As she said, Bill was a real dedicated student and trustee member, and mainly he was a wonderful teacher. So any of his students that are here know that he had a special way of handling students so that they felt they were doing their best. And many of them have done wonderful things. So this program that Ellen has created, I think, is a beautiful tribute to him and important to the school. Of course, you know that and say it more eloquently than I, but to have the students have the opportunity to meet so many of the designers that you have put or shared with them is probably one of the most exciting. I shouldn't say most exciting because everything should be exciting to a student, but anyhow, it's an outstanding way to feel the whole design community that you want to be part of. And it has been, what can I say to Bill, except that his work was so distinctive. He kind of had design in his blood. I'm not sure how it is, but everything he touched had a flair or a look that you could tell Bill did that, Bill did this, Bill did that. And it's a wonderful thing that a lot of people have, and we hope every student has it, to come up with a distinctive look or that is your own image, your own created process working out through products. I'm getting involved because I don't speak as well as I prefer, but he just would so appreciate this and understand this as he did many of them. And I hope the students will appreciate all of your lectures in the future because it's a big addition to their education, I think. But I really want to attribute this to, or say, Ellen, you know, it's been 13 years and you have searched the world for the eloquent designers or accomplished designers. You've picked them very well, as you just mentioned, and you share all this information with us, his friends, his students, and all the people I hope will see this and be additionally surprised and excited about what you were doing. And this year especially, which is different in so many ways, I hope is appreciated because it has to be appreciated. It's the time to appreciate all the problems that we have. And I hope that are positively settled, correct. So I thank you, Ellen, and I've thanked you every year, but 13 thanks. And I hope there are many, many more. And it will be all a success if you keep this. Your creative approach is what we say is one of the most important things. And also you follow through in an elegant way. So you are very important to me, to the school, and you know that. But I just wanted to say it one more time on the 13th year, the different year that's going to make a lot of difference. And I look forward to the speakers. I'm very excited to see them and here. I know they're involved in history problems and not problems, but history, what history is. And I do look forward to it. And thank you for coming. And I think that's what I want to say, except all you students, heed their words that you're going to hear today and all the other days. Thank you.
I guess I'll start introducing our speakers for today. We will be having Cheryl D. Miller, class of 1974, and she is a designer, author, theologian. She has established one of the first Black women-owned design firms in New York City in 1984. Miller holds a BFA from MICA and an MS from Pratt Institute, where she completed her graduate thesis, Transcending the Problems of Black Graphic Designers to Success in the Marketplace. Miller's thesis has inspired decades of research and activism by other designers and scholars. Her archives were acquired by Stanford University Libraries. In 2020 and 2021, Miller served as Distinguished Senior Lecturer at the University of Texas at Austin School of Design and Distinguished Scholar in Virtual Residence at Roger Williams University. She also teaches at Lesley University's College of Art and Design and Howard University. Miller was also awarded the Doctor of Humane Letters from Vermont College of Fine Art. I will also be introducing Maurice Cherry, who is a principal and creative director at Lunch, an award-winning multidisciplinary creative studio that he established in 2008 in Atlanta, Georgia. Currently, he works as the creative strategist for Code Sandbox. His podcast, Revision Path, showcases Black designers, developers, and digital creators from all over the world. It is the first podcast to be added to the permanent collection of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. His other projects include the Black Weblog Awards, 28 Days of the Web, the Year of Tea, and the design anthology Recognize. Maurice is the 2018 recipient of the Stephen Heller Prize for Cultural Commentary from AIGA. It was included in the 2018 edition of the Route 160, an annual list of the most influential African Americans ages 25 to 45.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jenny, for the beautiful introduction. And we're going to pass the event over to Maurice and Cheryl.
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Cheryl, so good to see you.
Listen, Maurice, it's good to be seen. I want to thank everyone for inviting us to this most esteemed event. I'm looking, I do so many of these, and I understand the guest list has been exhaustive and everyone is here participating. The ratio between invitations and actual attendees is very, very high. So I'm happy for everyone. And to MICA and all of academia that's here, and even to my students, I want to thank you. I have students from all of the universities where I'm lecturing. Please sit back and enjoy our story for you. It is quite an important history note that we want to leave to you today. So MICA and Betty and all of my friends and colleagues, welcome. And Maurice, take us on.
All right. Let's take a look at some slides, why don't we?
Okay.
I'm
going to ask the host, if possible, our tech, I'm seeing a screen that says that I'm spotlighted. Is there a way to move that? Is everybody seeing that, or am I the only one that's seeing that tech note?
You're the only one seeing that.
Okay. All right. So with that said, welcome again, and let's get busy with a very important history note. Hashtag WATBD is not a moment in COVID. It is a movement where the Black designers advocacy has a very rich history. And it starts right here in 1968. And I always like to give us a marker in time in history. I was a rising junior, 1968. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I started, my dad asked me, Cheryl, do you have a plan for college? And art college was somewhat new. And as a thought, it was transitioning from institute to academia. And I brought home, Dad, I want to go to art college. Well, what I didn't know was that in 1968, there was a movement that was launched in advocacy by Dorothy E. Hayes, and the author Dorothy Jackson from Print Magazine wrote and featured the Black Experience in Graphic Design 1968 for Print Magazine. Also in 1968, Communication Arts started asking this question. And I would say the whole dialogue of our participation started right there at the Civil Rights Movement, and our industry magazines began the discussion. And Dorothy E. Hayes was one of maybe 4 or 5 prominent female Black designers with her colleagues of about 45 men. and they are out of the genre of Paul Rand and Milton Glaser era. They're about 10 or 15 years older than myself. And her advocacy was to start telling New York City that as a community, we exist. And so 1968 is the first formal place where both CA, Communication Arts, and Print Magazine started looking for us. Thank you. You can, next. Dorothy was presented in a thematic feature of a portfolio of 40 statements. She appears again with a visual challenge. 1969, Color is a State of Mind, and Print again is tackling this, and Dorothy is, her solution appears, she's using the 1970s favorite Letraset and Pacta, for those who are back in the day and remember that. And so her work is featured in 1969. What I didn't know, in 1970, I received entrance to Rhode Island School of Design. I didn't know, I had no idea that there was a student demand, March 1970, trying to make the community more diverse in response to the student body. Can we get more diverse student body here? And they wrote, you'll see a discussion of the March 1970 demand letter from the RISD students. In response, Dorothy had a show featuring, she was supported by Herb Lubalin in the composing room in New York City. They established this awareness show of approximately 4950 of the Black New York designers, about 4 or 5 women, the balance Black men. This is the show and the publication that the publication show exhibit catalog for the show. And it started in New York City and appeared 1970 at the Rhode Island School of Design. And so this is one of the first Here We Are exhibits to let the community know that there is a body, a cadre of Black designers. And Dorothy and her colleagues started off with a show that actually George Olden and Herb Lubalin helped out in New York City. And then it appears at RISD in April 1970 in a response to beginning to let people know that we exist, and a response to the community there to be more diverse. Thank you, Maurice.
Right.
Life would have it, I left the Mid-Atlantic, graduated from MICA. You'll hear my story. Unfortunately, my father passed away. I was in fact on the September 1970 minority recruitment program. I was recruited into RISD on that program in RISD's response to the student demand for diversity on campus. And unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way it goes, my father passed away. And MICA received me 1971 sophomore year. Fully graduated from MICA and had a wonderful broadcast design career in Washington, DC. And I moved to New York in 1982 with my husband, and we established his business career. I went to school, and my firm I developed. I graduated from Pratt with this thesis, Transcending the Problems of the Black Graphic Designer and the Success in the Marketplace. In 1987, Maurice, yes, thank you. Print Magazine took the findings and allowed me to publish my footnotes. You know, I'm a footnote lady. And to feature Black designers and to begin to follow this work of Dorothy Hayes. I would say that the scholarship is the first that's been published in industry-wide. And Black Designers Missing in Action 1987 began its course of industry-wide recognition. Thank you, Maurice. Maurice, in 2015, was specifically, he's the first one to take all of that groundbreaking from 1968 to 1970 in my work, where are we, the data, 1%, 2%, 3%. Maurice develops a presentation for the SXSW Interactive March 14, 2015, where he's, I'm a footnote lady. I love my footnotes to prove points. He's our community statistician. He loves data. So he will give you the slice of the pie and how we relate to it. And he is the first one in his documentation and his presentation for SSXW. He can tell you more about that. In 2015, he coins the now hashtag, where are the Black designers? In his documentary, he picks up my journey, all right? He tells him my story, how the thesis is recorded in 1987, is published. And there is where AIGA, the whole concept turns into, the whole advocacy moves into awareness. And I want to celebrate while I'm recording here, some of the initial players that need to go down in this history. What happens in 1990 and 91 is the first AIGA Minority Task Force is recorded in the newsletter here as 1989. And not to put them all in order, but these are some of the names. You can write us for these documents. They exist in my collection at Stanford. We have them, we pass them out. Gus Granger at AIGA has them. He's a part of the diversity task force now. These are our original documents where the industry picks up the advocacy and is now introducing it. And I just want to shout out these names because we're recording, and this is a historical moment in COVID. And these are some of the names that appear on the records. First off, this is the first AIGA Minority Task Force, 1989. Carolyn Hightower is the president. And these are some of our participants that bring the advocacy from all the way from Dorothy Hayes's work through my scholarship, print magazine. These are the players now that begin to push it forward into the industry. Carolyn Hightower, Michelle Washington, Fo Wilson, John Morning, Michael Baruch, Randall Hensley, Eli Kens, Alan Payne, Chris Jenkins, Richard Wild, Richard Curtis, Steph Geisbuehler, Roger Tucker III, Roz Goldfarb, Michelle Stahl, and a real big shout out to Martin Fox, the publisher of print magazine, 1987. Tom Goss was my editor. That allowed me to come forward as a trade writer. And I want to continue to shout out to print and Steve Heller and Zach Pettit, who continue to receive my articles. And I've been a trade writer because print has allowed me to voice our advocacy to the community. So just for the record, I got to shout out those names. So we thank everyone that has brought us thus far. And Maurice has picked up all of this story in his revision path, and his work is collected at the Smithsonian. The history really has moved on, and through this incredible season where we are. And unfortunately, I've been at this since I was a young woman. 50 years is cyclical. History repeats itself. We're here. Print gave me an opportunity, and we published my final thought on this in a 4-part series. And this is my concluding thought, because one of the things that I wanted to really find out was the original history of where in the world. I wanted to answer this question once and for all, and I believe that I've done that. So the October 2020 print magazine that was just published as a 4-part series, and I conclude the matter by studying the history of the runaway slave woodcut. Okay, there's a lot of discussion about the ads, but I studied the woodcut and the ads, and really studying the African as the African first landed in North America. And so with that, I have collected 6 important footnotes that begin. I might not do the work, but I'm always leaving footnotes, and my family knows all of my current work that I'm doing should meet my collection at Stanford, I'm expecting that the new scholars will take whatever I haven't written. You will take my fractals and scholarships that I find, scholarship and footnotes that I find interesting, and to continue to do this work. I have some really interesting footnotes, and they've been published in October, this particular issue of print. James Newton, oh my gosh, I found that scholar. Oh, he's got an incredible vintage book from 1970s, and he tells me that Black printers were used for cutting woodcuts, and the artisan, the slave artisan, is the first Black graphic designer. And so his footnote is important. I discovered the history of printing in America, 1810 vintage footnote that describes Thomas Fleet, who had slaves, and he's about the only printer that gives slaves a recognition for the illustrations in his books. James Porter, Negro craftsman, arts and pre-Civil War days, shows us that the early American newspapers have used the slave artisan all the way down to W.E.B. Du Bois, the Negro slave artisan. He talks about white supremacy and systemic racist practices and the fear of competition, Negro competition after slavery and emancipation. And one of the most fascinating pieces of vintage scholarship I have discovered is W.L. Mackenzie King in his 1897 records of the International Typographic Union, the minute notes that said really what this is all about is that the white men were scared. They were afraid of the competition of the slave. And here we are having systemic issues. And so here we are. My footnotes, the story, it started in terms of really being documented in 1968. And so Maurice has a few questions for me, but those are your quick bullet points. This is not at all a moment, but a movement, which are very, very rich history. So Maurice, we'll take your questions, then we'll take some new questions. And again, we're gonna keep this wheel turning and the needle moving until we don't have to talk about this anymore. But until then, we're here.
I hear that. All right, so yeah, I do have just a couple of questions to ask, kind of in the time that we have, and then we'll be able to open it up for everyone else to ask questions. This designer, her name is Jacqueline Iyama. She talks about a concept called the white default. And for those in the audience, it basically goes like this: when whiteness is the default, the pain points, voices, experiences, and needs of Black, Indigenous, and men and women of color become an afterthought. As white people enjoy a culture of belonging, BIPOC, as that sort of acronym comes up, BIPOC are continuously othered. Cheryl, how have you encountered the white default throughout your career, and how have you pushed back against it?
Well, the irony of it is, I'm mid-century era in my young development, the era of only Paul Rand, Milton Glaser, Ivan Shemaev, Tom Geisler, Seymour Quast, Lou Dorsman, Saul Bass. These are ghosts that have monopolized our standards and have let no one else in. Maurice, on that newsletter, what's interesting is right next to the discussion of the AIG, a minority task force, right on the other side, there's Milton Glaser complaining that he's not in an IBM gallery show in New York City and that he's going to be lost in history. And so a part of this is the monopolizing of the space that nobody else existed except these hero worshipers. And our pushback in our community, Dorothy Hayes started it, demanding that other practitioners are here. And so I've pushed back and I continue to push back. And the worship has set the tone for what we have faced in prejudices over the course of decades, causing an oversight and an exclusion to many cadres of communities and peoples who are design practitioners too. These guys just have monopolized the oxygen, especially out of New York City. And I just find it so ironical that Milton Glaser is complaining on the very same newsletter that the show, a show that features European design in North America, he's really having a fit that he's being written out of history. I have to chuckle, okay? And we can't forget him. And he's there complaining that, oh my God, I'm not in this show. And how dare you erase me from history? And so here we are, Maurice. It's the irony has me laughing, okay?
Now, you've mentioned in previous lectures, as well as what we've just seen from these slides, that this "where are the Black designers" question has an over 50-year history. What should the current generation of designers do to ensure that this isn't still a talking point 50 years later in 2070?
We have to stay on the wall and we have to stay vigilant. And one of my dear young professor colleagues, Professor Raja, she said, "Miller, you have deputized everyone." And I said, well, wear your badge well and just stay there in advocacy, build your own and create awards and you judge and you write and you guys become professors and stand up and compete. So I'm sharing with everyone, keep your knee on this and keep the pressure on and only release it when there's no more resistance. And that's where I feel that finally there's some movement in collaborative work, some ally work. And this is something that we have to do this together. And I believe that, I believe before the end of my side of this on history, I'm going to see great movement. This is the first time this pandemic has put us in deep reflection, deep action, and things are changing. They have to change.
I agree. I think now we can open it up for questions from the audience. If you all have any questions for Cheryl, any questions for me as well, please feel free to leave them in the chat.
Yeah, and Maurice,
I think we're going to wait and do questions after Dion's talk.
Oh, okay.
But you all can talk a little bit longer. You still have some time if you want to. I know you had some other questions, Maurice.
Yeah,
about
Maurice, I want to, I think question number 4 you have about designers that I'm seeing or things. There's something that you had a question.
Yeah. I mean, your work has clearly encouraged a generation of Black designers. It certainly encouraged me, when I put my presentation together for South by Southwest. Which Black designers are inspiring you today? Okay,
well, I'm inspired for them and their inspiration. You always hear me say I'm not terribly inspired because I dig within, okay, to create new. And those are the ones when I see designers who create and don't duplicate, my eyes on them. And so I want to lift up a few of those. I have a few in my class that I think that I'm teaching. I think they're opening up a new genre. I'm calling some of my current students hybrid ethnographic designers, which means that they have mastered the Swiss, the international design, but they are bringing to the table of discussion global design, okay? And so I'm like, you guys, Cheryl Miller's we're gonna create a genre, hybrid ethnographic designers. And so I've got Maddie and Donnell and Denisha and Melinda, and they are graduating class of 2021, and they are definitely hybrid ethnographic designers. And so they're ready for corporate America, they're ready for B2B, but they can sit on a global team, which is more than an international team. And so there's this new genre, okay, of designers that are positioned to deal with the diversity that white default dominant culture cannot do without them. And so I think there's a new thing going on. And they're stepping on the platform of that. So I got a shout out to Maddie, Donnell, Denisha, Melinda. Okay, and if you want to know who you want to see those portfolios, write me. Okay, now the current ones that I'm very curious about, and that's because they are birthing brand new. They're not duplicating, they're creating. You know, I love Trey Seals, okay, because he started, there's not going to be another Trey Seals. See, there's not going to be another Cheryl Miller. See, this is where I want the designers to find your voice and don't duplicate, create, okay, be first name recognition. And so Trey came up with a concept, and you know, you always hear him, I thank you, he always respects me and says, Auntie, should I do it? I said, well, if you don't do it, somebody else will. Okay, Mike Nichols. Oh, I love Mike. He's old school. He's not letting that print go. And he's got a brand new voice with Umber, and he's not getting off of it. He's not duplicating, he's creating. Tashika Arsenault Sutton. Now, when we talk about Black female graphic designers, oh, she's gonna come with Dion with our lecture coming up, I think it's next week. Tashika is one of the best Black female graphic designers in this era that is hanging out with Cheryl Miller. Okay, I love her work. I want to shout out to Karana Magwood. Oh, she did a brand new, I think she's an HBCU graduate. She did a brand new treatment for presidential administration, and she is, you know, she follows Ashley. Okay, Black. I'm waiting for a White House clearance. I'm featuring, I'm writing for her for print about she and Ashley as the Black women of the White House design, and she broke some rules, and so I am looking carefully at Miss Magwood. And I do see a brand new aesthetic forward. The Pan-African designers, see, they are original in terms of the aesthetic. And see, I get up in the midnight hour when they're broadcasting their conferences. Oh, while everybody's sleeping, I'm with them in Ghana. Okay, and what they're doing is they're taking their design a level up from craftsmanship, and they've moved it into technology. And their aesthetic is pure, okay? It's not influenced other than by themselves, and to learn how they look at the landscape and the architecture and the animals to come up with their aesthetic for design. The Pan-African designers, okay, when listen, you won't can sleep while they're broadcasting. I'm up in the middle of the night with their conferences. And so I'm sharing with everybody, it's time to compete, and everyone now, it's wonderful how many Black designers are so well trained and exposed. One of the things that I'm really, really hoping is that many that are in the 30 to 45 year zone, wherever that class would have been, that they get invited into the platform of academia. I'm only one Cheryl Miller, okay? I'm teaching at 4 universities. And that's because in my generation, no one let us in order to teach. And so now you want BIPOC professors. And, you know, in a minute, I'm gonna have a streaming broadcast system for everyone. So I'm hoping that your generation will be invited, and then we can be trained and brought into, you know, academic fellowships and so forth, so that we can teach. You know, the demand for us to teach, you know, please come in with some, you know, all of your credentials and industry experience. And I'm looking for academia to receive us and give us these training opportunities to develop our new classes. I'm decolonizing. I've got an incredible, you're gonna ask me, what am I doing next? Okay, I'll let you do that. But these are my favorites. Anyone that's doing a new thing, not to duplicate, but from your belly create. If you have a vision of why these stand out in my mind, is they're unapologetic. They're unapologetic. And that's what B2B business requires, okay? That you're unapologetic, and you develop your voice, and then you get out there and you brand it and sell it, you know, and that's it. You know, first name recognition. That's why I say, be the only one, okay? And be unapologetic about it. And so for my students, if you know international design and you can do Swiss grid and everything else, now introduce global design, and then you'll be able to call yourselves hybrid ethnographic designers. That's my new, where did you get that from? Cheryl Miller called me a hybrid ethnographic designer, which means you've mastered international and then you're coming to the table of global design. And I'm contending it's something different. So there I go. I'm making it up, having a vision, claiming a voice, and pushing it forward. Come on, let's be unapologetic and bold about it. Be the first one. Well, if not you, who?
That's true. Do we have time for one final question?
Yeah, that would be perfect. One more question and then we'll do the next talk. Thanks, Marie.
All right. Yeah. Cheryl, what's the next phase for you? What's on the horizon for the venerable Cheryl Miller?
Cheryl Miller has stopped she's finished. I found the origins of the first Black graphic designer. And the irony of it is that I found him right on the website of come visit Williamsburg. Yeah, that's the whole humor of it for me, that on the website of Williamsburg, if you come visit the print shop, the museum tour guide tells you right there, it was the enslaved pressman. And I'm like, oh my God, I've done all of this scholarship to just, let me just go to Williamsburg, and on the tour, they tell me the enslaved pressman was the first graphic designer. Okay, so we move on from that. Now, where are the Black designers? I have found everybody and found where they came from. I'm decolonizing the basic, the canon. All right, so I've taken the 13 to 15 week, all the way from cuneiform, all the way into, the postmodernist. Each lecture I've decolonized, and I'm teaching critical thinking and design process when it comes to doing scholarship, and all of our writing reflections and assignments about, okay, well, what's your voice? You're the new practitioner to make new product, new pedagogy, new classes. And I got to shout out my theological training. I couldn't do all of this without just as on my design education. I learned a lot of how to do history and scholarship through my work at Union Theological. So I kind of did parallel synoptic work in theological studies, and I was trained for this scholarship. So I'm writing my classes, and I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. Follow me every day. I've got a zinger. I got a new zinger coming. I got a new zinger going on right now. I was like, oh my God, Miller, where do you find this stuff? Okay, but I won't talk about my new zinger. Just follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know. So I'm constantly finding new footnotes. I'm the community footnote lady, and so I dig deep in the archives and find new things, like, oh my goodness, because if I don't inspire us to document, and we want to lift up all of my colleagues that are helping me with the history of Black graphic design database we're developing at Stanford University. There's so much about our history that are in oral traditions and card catalogs. Not everything, you had to live through it, okay? And so all of it is not Googleable. And that's why I'm encouraging any of us who are left. We know things you can't research if you don't know who you're supposed to be researching. So it's a lot of it is in our memory, our oral traditions, in folders that we kept. And so there are 40 of my colleagues and a few peers that are still left to tell the story. We're putting all of our For a Better Moment scraps and fractals and ephemeral into a collection. And so I just want to document all these things. Maurice, I may never write all of the books, but I want to leave enough of the scholarship and footnotes and fractals so that the new scholars can, do the work. So my assignment is, what do you know? And I'm writing it down and throwing it in a box and sending it to Stanford, putting it online, and things that are beyond what you can Google and find on a current blog. There are things that are definitely in memory banks, oral traditions, and card catalogs. And those of us who know it, and that's what I want to shout out. I'm teaching the decanonized version of this at the University of Texas. we're working out establishing a relationship for me to continue to do my scholarship there. I'll be at Roger Williams as well. And I like to shout out there where Professor Nikki said, Cheryl, we want you to teach us because you are the history, you know, and so that's what we're doing. We want to make sure that that my friends and I and my final work, we are decolonizing design justice. Before, up until this point, I've been into, you know, advocacy. Now I'm into, we're going to make it right. and that's it. And you guys, like Professor Roger says, Miller, you've deputized. So be ye deputized and keep the needle moving.
All right. Cheryl Miller, thank you. Again, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for schooling all of us and really for just transcending from designer to historian and really leaving a legacy for us all to follow and to continue. Thank you.
Maurice, I have one more thing to say. I have got to shout out. I called Ellen. I said, Ellen, can I talk to you offline? And she said, yes. And I want to say this to the class of 21, 22, 23, 24, and following. And Brockett, when you say you want to bring forth MICA design, I want to say humbly to MICA design, not only have I been about this advocacy, but I have been blessed to be award-winning. I never took any other continuing ed design. I studied business at business and wrote this thesis at Pratt. I did not restudy design. The graphic design department, for whatever I experienced, the good, the bad, the ugly of 1971 to 74, my design education brought me here. And it has stood, I've stood on that foundation. And I've been blessed to be humbly award-winning. So don't you worry. Use your MICA design degree and use it proudly, unapologetically. If it's lasted me a lifetime, what more will it do for you?
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Maurice. That was really inspiring. I'm going to invite Henny Bekela, a wonderful graphic design student, to introduce Dion Moses. Thank you, Henny.
Thanks, Ellen. Dion Moses, class of 2019 and 2021, is an artist, activist, and curator. She holds a BFA in photography from MICA and is currently completing an MFA in MICA's curatorial practice program. She is founder of Black Lives LLC, a cultural research firm uncovering Black history within colleges, universities, and churches. This startup helps Black communities preserve an account of their past and present. Black Lives LLC is currently preparing the 2021 relaunch of the Maryland Institute Black Archives, a project Diane initiated while she was an undergraduate at MICA. She is the recipient of numerous awards, such as the Fred Lazarus Leadership for Social Change Award, MICA Space for Black Creative Imagination Fellowship, and the Lesley King Hammond Graduate Award. Dion's work has been featured in Art in America, Art News, Be More Art, Aperture Magazine, The Washington Post, and many other publications.
Thank you, Henny. I appreciate the introduction. I'm truly honored to be a part of this distinguished panel who's been in the game for so long. And I want to jump right into the presentation. Let me share. Please excuse me, I'll be looking at my laptop while my notes while going through the presentation. So yes, I'll be going in chronological order. I want you to keep in mind that before emancipation, white slave holders denied our ancestors access to education. Sorry, I'm gonna start my stopwatch. Denied our ancestors education in an effort to justify and maintain slavery as well as their status. Therefore, learning and reading and education became a symbol of freedom and advancement. So when listening to the stories and artists or players in MICA's history, keep in mind how they preserve, how they persevered despite oppression, created space for themselves and others, as well as maybe even created barriers for African Americans. I want to acknowledge MICA's history book. It was created by Doug Frost and published in 2010. It gives an overview of MICA's history and influence in art and design from a Western perspective. I say that because page 91 is what inspired the creation of the Maryland Institute Black Archives. It spoke about segregation at MICA, but the story ended there. Like Cheryl, I knew there was more, and I wanted to find out where the Black designers were and also where the Black students were on campus. I started digging, and this is what I found. Many of MICA's founders, board members, donors, and students were prominent members and family members of Baltimore's government and high society. They created and perpetuated many laws that encouraged discrimination against African Americans. They were also, as we say, slave owners. The most influential founder was John H.B. Latrobe. He was a lawyer, politician, artist, and abolitionist, as well as a slave owner. He created several areas and organizations with storied racist pasts in Baltimore, like Druid Hill Park, the Maryland Historical Society, as well as the American and Maryland Colonization Societies, which were created to send free Black people back to Africa. The colony failed in Maryland County. The colony failed, but the Maryland County in Liberia still exists to this day and has a sister city relationship with the city of Baltimore. MICA was founded in 1826 during slavery, which started in 1619 and lasted for more than 200 years. This is their charter, and it states that they will accept any and all things necessary to keep the Institute running, like donations, gifts, grants, land, and chattel. Chattel in the 1800s meant enslaved peoples. The Institute was originally called the Maryland Institute for the Promotion of the Mechanic Arts, which was located in downtown Baltimore. The college was created to encourage and promote innovation and innovation during the Industrial Revolution. MICA provided lectures, a library, and a classroom space focused on these subjects below. The college burned down in an uprising in 1835 and scaled back and rented a space above the old post office to teach classes. During this time, the post offices were known as places where runaway enslaved people were taken and never heard from again. And also in 1851, MICA relocated to MARSH or Center Market, where they flourished for 53 years. MARSH Market was also known as a slave auction area. Both the auction and MICA were located on Baltimore Street, I believe on opposite ends of the block when I've looked at old maps. So this is Power Plant Live, which is the current structure, which was the old MICA building. In 1856, just after this American Civil War ended, Thomas Wiggins was the first Black artist I have recorded to visit the Institute. He was an autistic enslaved man who was known to be able to play anything that he heard. He was trained, even though he was recorded as not being trained. After slavery ended, he was still held captive by General Bethune, Thomas Bethune and his family, where they continued to tour him around the world. And I have in the archives that shows that he visited MICA more than 20 times. Uncle Tom's Cabin, as well as minstrel shows, also played and appeared at MICA, perpetuating Black stereotypes of Black people. And in 1866, the Baltimore Association for the Morale and Education for the Improvement of Colored People was founded by several MICA founders and board members. The goal of this association was to establish and staff primary, trade, and a teachers college for Black people in Baltimore City. At the time, MICA became the leading advocate of art education at the same time. So they urged the state of Maryland to institute drawing and art in public schools. MICA would provide the teachers, and in return, they would receive an annual appropriation or stipend for this program. And MICA would offer one scholarship to any student in every district, which a councilman had the privilege of appointing. At this time, when this contract was made, the mayor was Ferdinand Latrobe, which was John H.B. Latrobe's son, also the founder of MICA, who was also leading the institution at the time. 2 years after this contract was gained, the association signed an ordinance to make all of the teachers in Black schools white. So this also makes me think about the MAT program that MICA still has in existence and is a leading advocate of art education in schools in Baltimore County. In 1890, Harry S. Cummings, here on the right with the brown image, he was elected the first councilman in Baltimore. He used his privilege to appoint Harry T. Pratt to MICA on the scholarship. MICA had to accept him or forfeit their contract, so he was accepted into the school. From 1892 to 1895, Black councilmen were consecutively elected into office in this particular district, and they continued to appoint young Black men. 1892, George R. Mills, 1893, William H. Davis, and 1894, Howard M. Gross. All of these students were in high school and they attended MICA's night drawing class where they studied alone. Nevertheless, their presence caused enrollment to drop and MICA to be known as a mixed school. So in 1894, MICA's board voted to only accept reputable white pupils. So in 1895, Robert H. Clark became the first student denied from MICA. He returned the following year on the steps of MICA with his father, where he was denied again. And that moment is what inspired Take Back the Steps, which some people may know 123 years later, which the Maryland Institute Black Archives did along with the Black Student Union and members of our community. Robert H. Clark eventually went on to sue MICA for receiving state funds, but not being open to the public. MICA lost its case because the state determined that MICA was a private school, and that there were also Black schools. There were also schools that Black students could go to that was receiving minimal state funding. So MICA did not accept Black students until schools were desegregated 60 years later. As for Harry T. Pratt, he graduated from MICA in 1895, and he went on to become a prominent Baltimore activist, entrepreneur, and educator. Also worth noting, during this time, the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper was created, which is the longest running African-American family-owned newspaper in the United States. We are proud to be partners with the Afro, and because of them, we have them to thank for helping to fill some of these gaps in the history with this project. However, many of the stories are still incomplete. This image is from MICA's 1902-1903 yearbook. It features George, Lillie, and the janitor. The caption says, "He works at the Maryland Institute." And then Lillie says, "My, he must be the boss there, ain't he?" And George says, "Yo, you bet he is. He's the janitor." Through my census records, I have found 2 janitors who worked at MICA from 1837 to 1913. So I think about them when I see this caricature. They worked at MICA during Jim Crow era. And that is Robert Campbell. He worked at MICA from 1837 to 1913. He lived in the Druid Hill community, not too far from MICA, where MICA is currently located. Retired with full pension in 1913. Lucy Roberts was also a janitor at MICA in 1910. But back to the caricature. With help from the community and locating the signature, it's right here. I was able to determine who the illustrator was, and it was Oliver Millard McGee. He went on to become a successful illustrator in New York City, and he graduated from MICA in 1905. MICA was destroyed by a great fire in 1904 downtown Baltimore. It actually burned down, MICA actually burned down twice, what I told you about before in 1835 and in 1904. And then one year later, in 1905, the state of Maryland philanthropist Andrew Carnegie provided land and funds for MICA to construct its main building, where it currently is today in Bolton Hill. And there's evidence in MICA's archive of Black men working on the building. This is just one image. In my records, I have Mabel Randolph Brooks as being the first woman on record to apply to MICA at its new location, but she was denied entry in 1915. She vowed to never return to Maryland again. She went on to become the first Black person to graduate from Yale with a BFA in painting. She described her time there as years of hell. She went on to teach art appreciation at HBCUs in the South. And in 1942, she traveled to Haiti to open a studio and teach art at the University of Port-au-Prince. I've also found her archives in W.E. Du Bois archive and in other universities around the country. Ernest Atkinson, his paintings were discovered by a MICA faculty member who entered his artworks into a charcoal club exhibition, which was only white. His paintings were accepted. He was 28 years old and he was from Jamaica. I wasn't able to find more information about him, but we are still currently looking. The 1920s is the Harlem Renaissance jazz era. MICA had a vibrant campus life, something I feel like we still lack to this day, honestly. They had a student council, out-of-town club, an athletic club that played basketball in the main building, and they also had the MICA players who are featured here. They produced a variety of Broadway and variety shows. Henry Brenner is here, shown in blackface. He was a student of Hans Schuler in the sculpture department. He went on to become a famed sculptor. And then here are other members of the MICA Players Club taking pictures with children. It was right outside of MICA, and that's also a MICA special collection. I'm not sure what she's doing here. The Jolly Follies were also produced in 1920s. They were a theater review. It was entertaining mix of comedy sketches, opera, burlesque, and vaudeville, and it was presented on MICA's main court. MICA also had fraternities and sororities. Alpha Rho Tau sorority, here they are addressed in 1940s as mammies on the steps of MICA's main building. In 1927, MICA also featured the Fete of Lights. It was a costume ball that was held in their main building, and it benefited European traveling scholarships. The highlight was always a grand stroll down the staircase. And this is Mr. Hughes This is him winning first prize for African fantasy, and he was a MICA faculty member. 1928, found an article in the Afro talking about LILLIE Mae Carroll Jackson. She attempted to enroll her daughter Virginia into MICA, but could not due to segregation. And she didn't enroll her into Morgan because Morgan lacked accreditation and her daughter wanted to be an artist. So she sent her elsewhere. So, but the Afro article, however, states something very important in which LILLIE Carroll Jackson, she credited that moment as making her aware of the disadvantages for African Americans in Baltimore. She went on to become, LILLIE Carroll Jackson went on to become the president of the Baltimore NAACP chapter and is considered by many the mother of the civil rights movement. Virginia, her daughter, went on to be an artist as well as a teacher in the South. And we have her to thank for establishing a LILLIE Carroll Jackson Museum located half a mile right behind MICA's main building. And she also established a museum in her namesake in Savannah. However, it just actually was recently listed on the Savannah Perils property list. So I'm hoping that we can, work with them in the future. Sorry. 1930s, we're in the Great Depression, also National Housing Act, 1934, which is with redlining and a growing civil rights movement. I do want to announce a trigger warning for the upcoming slides. In 1935, an art commentary on lynching, a traveling exhibition was arranged by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, in collaboration with the College Art Association. It was curated by Walter White, who was NAACP president. He started the exhibition in New York, however, it received a lot of controversy, but he wanted to tour around the United States to talk about the atrocities of lynching. It featured a variety of artists of all backgrounds. It was brought to the Maryland Institute and received a controversial review. It was removed within 1 week and moved into a smaller gallery, as well as decreased with some of the artworks. People were known to have passed out, but no reason was given, according to the Afro, as to why the works were removed. And from what I know, none of these works were ever shown again. That's something I would love to recreate or to see again happen. In 1940, Ellsworth Parker was the only model of color at MICA. That was an article that was written in the Afro. And I think about how students use his body and likeness to further their careers, but also what he may have gained from the interactions at the Institute. I was happy to find, I found this article first in 2017, but I found this image of Ellsworth Parker in MICA's collection in early 2019. So it was a nice confirmation as to his efforts or his participation at MICA. In 1940, the Carnegie Scholarships provided art education to artists in Baltimore. While white students studied at MICA, Black students studied at Public School 130. Their instructors were white faculty from the Institute, and these images are of Charles P. Cross's classrooms, and it comes from MICA Special Collections, and it was a gift from Morgan State University. This one image features George Brown. He was a 10-year-old cartoonist. He was also featured in the Afro. He dreamed of being a cartoonist one day, like Walt Disney. So similar to Ellsworth Parker's story, I found this article first, and then through research, I was able to find George Brown in MICA's collection. And of course, there were more scholarship winners, Thaddeus Quarles and William Falcone. Most of these students attended Dunbar, even Douglas High School. The late 1930s and 40s, the Baltimore Art Center was created by several artists, including Reuben Kramer and Perna Crick. They were both MICA faculty members and a married couple. Perna quit her paid teaching job at MICA to take a non-paid role at the center. And the center was sponsored by the interracial fellowship. And it taught artists 5 to adults in painting, illustration, and sculpture, but it also accommodated students with disabilities and veterans. In 1947, the center actually sued the state for some financial support under the same grounds as Robert H. Clark, but they lost their case and the center was closed shortly after. Leon A. Norris was one of the students who went to the center, and he tried to attend MICA, but he also was denied. So he sued MICA for discrimination in 1947 and lost his case. 13 years later, I found an article in the Afro that he stabbed his wife, possibly from PTSD. In 1954, when schools were desegregated due to the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education, MICA confirmed this decision, and 4 years later, we had our first Black graduate, Blanche N. Duggar. She majored in costume design, and Walter Sneed was our first graduate in 1958. And Blanche, there were several articles where she was designing wedding dresses for prominent members in Baltimore society. The 1959, MICA actually changed its name to MICA, and it reported the highest percentage of Black students in any private higher education institution in the state of Maryland. Sam Gilliam also taught MICA at this time. And then the Vietnam War began shortly after that in the 1950s, and our community experienced two tragedies that I have on record, both actually coming from the graphic design department. Alexander S. Chin, he enrolled in MICA in 1966 and majored in graphic design and sculpture, and he was killed in action in 1968. He actually won 4 Purple Hearts before he was killed in action. The interesting story about him is that he was buried in a family plot in Maryland, but his body was exhumed after his stories of his bravery were told, and he is now interred in Arlington National Cemetery with Brett Chapman, his commander who he died alongside of. Specialist George Cox also passed away. He majored in graphic design in MICA. His sister Angela here, she keeps his name and his memory alive by selling his artwork and designs at the BMA on like scarves and different things like that. 2 days ago, actually, it makes the anniversary, the 53-year anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King, which set off 3-day riots and 3 days and 4 nights of rioting in Baltimore, which means that would have been happening right around this time, and MICA had to close its doors. That at that time, Sal Starcati was the grad resident artist, and he painted Students Mourn Dr. Martin Luther King on MICA Station building. And these images are this video from the National Archives. Tamara Dobson in 1968 graduated from MICA in fashion illustration. She went on to become Cleopatra Jones, and she died in 2006 of the original Cleopatra Jones, excuse me, and she died of complications from multiple sclerosis. Thinking about the archive and the stories and the people and the alumni that I've encountered, I often feel close to them and I can relate to their stories. I also have multiple sclerosis, so when thinking about Tamara Dobson, I feel really close to her and her stories. And also, hearing stories and learning about more about the students, I begin to feel more as family. And I'm going to keep going, and we can talk more about it later. The Black Artists East, that was a group that was of 50 painters, poets, and musicians from Morgan State College and MICA and the Peabody Institute, and they formed to promote Black art in America. The collective participated and hosted many shows in Baltimore. Dr. Lesley King Hammond came to MICA in 1976 as the Dean of Graduate Studies, and she became the first African-American to hold that position. Her, along with Fred Lazarus, they brought the Ford Foundation for Fellowships for Artists of Color to MICA to provide scholarships for minorities, turn the MFA and teach in colleges and universities. So we today have some of these leaders at MICA. Bill Gaskins is in the director of the photo department. Paula's community arts, and Colette is now chairing core. I got about a minute and 30 seconds left. James Irwood, I want to highlight him in 1989. He is an alumni of MICA. He won a copyright case against the community for creative nonviolence. They hired him to create a sculpture depicting the plight of homelessness for a Christmas pageant in Washington, D.C. called Third World America. And the case is landmark because he won a law and labor case where he owns the copyright, CNV owns the sculpture, and they both determine how it's distributed. 2001, Baltimore philanthropists Eddie and Sylvia Brown made history when they gifted MICA $6 million, the largest in MICA's history, to build a digital arts center. Today, it's the hub for the graphic design department, the largest BFA and MFA design department that MICA has. Their daughter also graduated from the program. And almost done, 2 more slides left. MICA acquired Globe in 2011. People know about it. It's printing press, and it's in the printmaking department. It also has a storied past, a long history with producing posters and screen printing for vaudeville acts, movie theaters, sports, rock, hip hop, funk, and go-go. So here are some things that are in their collection. Okay. And in 2020, this is where we are now. MICA elected its first African-American chair, Stuart Clark here. We currently have 4 African-American representatives on the board of trustees. So I want to highlight that. And also, last but not least, this is my last slide, highlight something that happened last night. And I will press play.
A controversial statue in Canton gone tonight. The statue was of Captain John O'Donnell, who founded Canton as a plantation in 1786, where he owned slaves. Hundreds of people signed a petition to take down the statue, and they sent letters to City Hall. Mayor Brandon Scott released a statement tonight calling this a historical moment and says that many more publicly named monuments, statues, streets, and schools across the city also need to be reassessed.
That statue was created by longtime MICA faculty member Children Street, and he passed away in 2019. So as you see, Black history at MICA is not in a bubble, but it crosses various fields as well as across the United States and the world. Thank you. I want to also highlight our community partners, which Henny stated, but also want to highlight the Black Student Union, Afro Charities, the Maryland Center for History and Culture, and the University of Baltimore. If you're in Baltimore, you can get into the Maryland Center for History and Culture for free if you use the promo code Tom Miller Day. So thank you all for listening. I hope that it was enjoyable and interesting. Please follow me on all social media. Thank you.
That was incredible, Dion.
I made it.
I can't believe how much content you put into your 20 minutes. It was really spectacular. I like to have all of the speakers come back to the stage, and we're going to have a conversation, ask some questions. Maurice, we'd love to see you back on the stage too. I'm in awe. I know our audience is in awe. The work that you do is so important. And what fascinates me is that so much of what all of you do is making visible something that's always been there. And that's what history is uncovering the truth, right? Making the truth visible, making new stories about the past. So I wanted to start with a question really for each of you, which is, how do you do your research? And maybe I'd ask Maurice first, because he does incredible research too. In his 2015 Where Are the Black Designers talk is legendary, like everybody else up here. And you did so much new research building on what the groundwork that Cheryl had laid. So I'd love to know how you did that. You could tell us a little bit what you learned.
Yeah, sure. I'm a big research person. I mean, I sort of have come up in the generation where we still had card catalogs in the libraries. So I'm used to going to libraries, running through the aisles, trying to find what I need. So I do a lot of actual like hard-based research in libraries. I'm in Atlanta, and I'm fortunate that we have several research libraries here, but the one that I went to particularly for the Where Are the Black Designers presentation is the Auburn Avenue Research Library, which is in sort of a historic Black neighborhood here in Atlanta. But I'm also a child of the web, so I do a lot of web research. Web research, I find, can only go so far. I think that's generally just because of the ephemerality of the web. Things get overwritten very easily. Like sometimes it's even hard to find things from 10 years ago, let alone, further than that. So I try to use a mix of those two methods of just actual like physical research in libraries and other institutions, as well as web-based research to kind of try to bridge that gap. Also, because of my podcast, I'm not scared to talk to anybody. So I will very easily send out an email, send out a message. I will cold call just to try to get in touch with someone so I can get the information that's needed. Actually, kind of an interesting story about that. One of the very first interviews that I did for Revision Path was with Emory Douglas, who is a AIGA medalist, but is also known as the former Minister of Culture for the Black Panther Party. And the way that I was able to get him as an interview was I saw that there was this skate shop in Oakland that was selling skateboard decks that had his art featured on them. And they were mentioned that these were licensed. And so I just called up the skate shop and asked about how they obtained the licensing. And it turned out the owner of the skate shop is Emory Douglas's MICA's grandson. And so we just had a conversation on the phone one Sunday afternoon. It's like, yeah, I'll let Granddad know. And he just put us in touch, and we happened to make that happen. So that's not something that you can get just from, going to the web or clicking through to the library. So I try to use a mix of different methods to sort of get to what my, hopefully what my goal is when it comes to doing research.
Thank you. Cheryl, you want to tell us how you do your research?
Yes. In addition to being responsive to my own curiosity, and I want to kind of double answer a question people always want to know, who was your mentor, Cheryl? I'm like, you know what? I did not have a design mentor. No one took an interest in me. So that's why I have always talk about it from my belly. I've had to find my design voice. But the answer to your question about research is you need a good coach. And I want to celebrate, honor, and thank Dr. Lesley King Hammond for being my academic coach. And I want you, Dion, to check our years. She was there as a new PhD student, recipient. She just earned her PhD, and she was one of the first professors of African history. And she occupied that before, I do believe, her dean responsibilities. And I met her in 1971, and she has taken care of me academically. And when I had to graduate from Pratt would not let me do a design project. They required of me, you often hear me say that, they said, Miller, design is too easy for you. You're not getting out of here, make a contribution, make a contribution to the industry. And I knew what that meant. That meant that I was gonna have to write. And so I contacted Dr. King, and I said, Dr. King, I need you as my primary reader and coach. And what she did, when we talk about research, she pushed me past my capacity. Okay, which that's what you need, someone who's going to bring you attention to the text. She is my academic coach 50 years. And she knows that, because every time I got to write something or something major, it's like, Dr. King, where are you? And that infamous thesis would not be so without a really good, another set of eyes. And she painfully pushed me to find answers for questions in cross-discipline outside of myself. And so a part of my research was having a research partner who was a formal coach for these academic milestones in my life. So I guess I didn't need a design mentor. I needed an academic mentor. And Dr. King has been with me 50 years. That doesn't mean you have to do the math on how old we are.
No one's counting. No one's counting.
Don't count. But you could back, if I told you I met her sophomore year, you could kind of count back, but count her back. Don't count me back. And so having a trusted coach, if you really want to do some serious work, and go do what they tell you to do. Don't ask for a mentor and they tell you what to do, and then you go off and do something else, okay? But my recollection is Dr. King was the first one I met in 1971, and she had just signed up with a brand new PhD and was teaching African history, I believe it was. It wasn't even African American. She's an African art history scholar, and that's what she was teaching. And she's been with me, pushing me to this excellence in writing and scholarship. And I give her kudos. And Dr. King, if there's anything with scholarship, you gotta find a Dr. King, okay? And then maybe you'll get along the way. Even recently, Ellen, I shared with her I was, working on my book, and she sent me off again. I said, I gotta stop talking to Lesley. She makes too much work for me.
Yeah.
So if you're on board, thank you for a lifetime, okay, of coaching academics, okay? And that's what I needed, was an academic mentor, not a design mentor.
How am I doing my research? That was the question, right?
Well, yeah, because and I think it might help
my
people
mentors.
to also hear more about the Maryland Institute Black Archive.
Yeah.
Because not only do you conduct research, but you've established a research collection. And I think it would be really wonderful for our students and the audience here to know more about what that is and how you created it.
Yeah, it did start from MICA's history book, and actually it started from my experience on campus and coming to campus and not seeing Black people working on campus, but not in the classroom with me. So I started wondering how MICA's population is so different than the city. And that's what started my curiosity and wondering what MICA's history was. So when I went to the MICA's history book and saw that page, and it just started from there. And honestly, for me, my research process is organic. I mix, researching and cross-referencing MICA's history, but once I find the people and their families, I go back and I'm in ancestry. It's almost like, I don't know if anybody watches the show Catfish, but I feel like it's like that, I'm cross-referencing images and things like that. But one of the other things that's really important, especially for me in Baltimore, and since our stories were not reported, is talking to people in the community, specifically campus safety, students who have been experienced, alumni, Cheryl, Dr. Lesley, people who have, lived and experienced MICA because our stories were not recorded. So one of the biggest things for me is talking and interacting with the community, which unfortunately, because of COVID, I haven't had as much experience as I'd like to, just interacting on campus. But it has allowed me to really focus on the archive and hone in on this. So for the past 4 years, I started this project in 2017 in undergrad in my junior year because I transferred to MICA, and I've been working on it the 2 years in my undergraduate year, and now the 2 years here in graduate school. And that's just been really researching and kind of trying to piece together and contextualize all the information, because it's all over and it's spread out, and I'm just grabbing. So the story that I told here today, I just want to emphasize, very short, condensed, and not a complete story at all. I just tried to grab some of the things that I knew most about to try to put together a history and give you some kind of timeline as we go through MICA's history. But then also the archive will be relaunching in May, designing a database for us so that we can, which will also link back to other archives, but so that we can know our history, our students. And I'm really hoping that, we can one day have a place and get a place on campus for us, and like Heritage Hall or something like that. We need some placemaking at MICA.
Thank you. And there's a question from one of our students, Peter Turnbull, about the limits of web-based research. And I think all of you have touched on that a bit. Are you each making a commitment to contributing to more, that your research then becomes available online? I know, Cheryl, you're part of a African-American history archive at Stanford. Is that something that that an online student or researcher can access?
Well, we are, and I see a question right behind that about, do I know any collections? Right now, I will say that I'm archivist to 2 collections at Stanford. And the first one being my own, okay, which is the Cheryl Miller collection at Stanford. And what's in that body of work, which is very unique, is all of my writing, all of everything that it would take to all the leave behind, all of the interviews, hand notes, documents, everything that I've ever written for the studio, for articles, interviews, the whole thing is there. Plus all of the design thinking for all of my projects, inclusive of my MICA portfolio. I mean, you name it, everything I've ever done. All right. And it's not about me. It has a lot to do with what I was publishing, especially through my New York firm, that the reason they wanted my collection was for 5 schools of research. So yes, there's a design base to it, but it's the documentation of who I was publishing, and those stories have annotations. And now I've collected the history of Black graphic design North America, and I'm asking my friends, and I can invite Dion, your work into that. We're taking it all in, and we are looking for sponsors who will help the archival process and archivists work at Stanford. So if anyone wants to donate and all of that, the money doesn't come to me, it goes to Stanford so that all this work can be digitized. Right now, we're in a collection process. I'm really excited of the collections that we're receiving. Dorothy Hayes that I mentioned, her niece inherited her entire collection and has donated it to Stanford. She's in that process. Reynold Ruffins, who is Milton Glazer's partner, one of his recognized partners, is a Black man in all of his work. So everyone that is still living and that I know, I've invited. And if I've missed anybody, don't think it's, you can just say, Cheryl, I want to be in the collection. And Stanford is setting up relationship for you to donate. So MICA, your collection, your copies are things that you want to be recognized in that. We introduce you straight to Stanford Libraries. You can have your work integrated in there. And this will be the only database. And they have, listen, a lot of these universities, this is what they do. And Stanford has the ability to preserve. So I see there's a question, about funding and so forth. If anybody wants to donate to the archivist process of putting my collection and the history of Black graphic design in North America, basically all of the support will go to the archival, the digital, online. It will be the only one of its kind. There's a collection in Chicago that you can, Bernie Lockhart has some entree to. There's some things there. I'm trying to get things in a place that even if we have the directory for where things are. And Stanford, that's just what Stanford does. Okay, so, I invite MICA, we've invited AIGA to give all of their work from my work all the way up present. So Mr. Granger and Bernie Johnson, we are collecting all of that. And we really want to see it in one place. And Stanford's the kind of place that has the money, the support to get all of that done. So I invite anybody or anything that's connected to me with this, the work can be received, and it's for the greater body for us all. I just want to leave people the footnotes to do the research. I can't write, I'm not writing all of this stuff, but I want to make sure that as many of these fragments are in a place where there's just the wherewithal to do the digitizing, to put it in a place where it can be resourced globally. So that's the answer to my question on that, I've got my hands, I'm an archivist to two collections. And if anybody feels that they have documents that want to be in that, you can research me. I introduce you straight to Stanford Libraries. They're receiving anybody that would like to corporate sponsor that. The money does not come to me, it goes to Stanford specifically for the archival and digital online on work. So if you got something, MICA, if you want to be noted in that, come on. It'll go straight to the history of Black graphic design North America, and your presence will be, and especially as you're my I'm alum and alma mater and all of that. There's just this connectedness, and that's what I'd like to see is all of it come to a place. The whole cadre that we got so many. It's so tribal. I'd like to have us in one place, which is a heart's desire for me, so that the future scholars don't have to, surf all over the internet for us. We come from someplace, and we come from each other. Okay, and so with that said, I invite you to contact me if you have collections and fractals and things of important people. It's amazing the information that comes to me. I met Courtney at Harvard, and she says, Cheryl, my grandfather designed the $100 bill. And I'm like, really? And so people just, I just keep these connections going, introduce you to the library, and they've got a project to receive all of our fractals because it's all over the place.
That's beautiful. And I see that Brockett has put a link to that Stanford collection in the chat, and many other links. We're going to have to call it bring this to a conclusion, I have a few final thank yous and remarks to make. Of course, I especially want to thank our speakers for coming together for this truly historical event, to have 3 generations of activists, historians, designers, curators, who I think are designers, to be doing this work and sharing this work here at MICA. Cheryl and Dion are the first MICA alums to serve as William O. Steinmetz Designers in Residence. We're really, really proud. And not only that, but Dion, who is a BFA alum and a current graduate student at MICA, she has also helped to organize the content for this year's residency and is hosting a second event on Thursday, April 15th at 6 p.m. She has invited Tashika Arsenault Sutton, incredible designer, historian, and educator, and Cheryl Miller to come back and talk about the history of Black women in graphic design. And that event is part of the residency, but also organized by the Maryland Institute Black Archives, created by Dion Moses. So, wow, this is like a really unique iteration of this residency this year. I want to just thank everybody who supports MICA, all the people who brought this event together, our amazing students who are here today. Thank you. If you are a MICA alum or a community member who loves MICA and graphic design, please consider donating to support more programs like this one. And Brocket's going to post a link in the chat. And thank you to everyone who's supported us over all these years, everything that you do. And again, this is just a historic event, and we're just so happy that you are here, and so happy that Betty Cook was here today to greet us. And thanks also to the students for their great introductions. It means a lot to us. Thank you.